All right, well, hello and welcome to the KQ2 YouTube channel. I'm KQ2 reporter Sam Rowe. Today I'm joined by Mr. Beat. He's the owner of the Mr. Beat YouTube channel where he makes videos on history, elections, and all things to do with American politics. He is a local person. He used to teach in the Blue Valley School District. Mr. Beat, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. When I first was telling people that I was interviewing someone named Mr. Beat, at first they thought I was talking about Mr. Beast.
Yes, yes, I'm not surprised by that at all.
How often do people ask you about your name being similar to Mr. Beast?
All the time. It's basically a meme now, and I even made a video comparing us because so many people were mistaking us,
Yes. Well,
confusing
I think
us.
it would have been quite an accomplishment if I had gotten Mr. Beast to sit down and talk with me today. But I'm very excited to be talking with you. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to chat with me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Yeah.
So, I would say you have made a video on every presidential election in the history of America, and you have
hmm
made many other videos on U.S. history and things of that nature. I would say that you're an expert in American presidents and American history. Would you say the same?
I would say I'm an expert maybe at communicating that stuff. I try to be at least, or I pretend to be an expert on that. But yeah, like I've learned a thing or two along the way.
Yeah. And those are wonderful videos that you have on all the presidential elections. It kind of shows how history has changed and how our elections have changed, and things go from one method to another method throughout history. Um, and so I want to ask you specifically. Obviously, we're in St. Joseph, Missouri. Missouri, throughout its history, has kind of gone back and forth. Used to be a state that was a bit of a swing state. In recent years, it's become more of what you would say would be a red state. What do you think has been the biggest change for Missouri as far as our electoral history goes?
Yeah, up until the 1990s, Missouri was reliably a Democrat state. Bill Clinton won in Missouri, for example. But that did shift, I think, as much of the country shifted, as far as like those that lean to the right began to support more and more the Republican Party versus the Democratic Party, which is a trend that goes back all the way to the 1940s. We Historians call this the party switch, and basically, Missouri is a great example of that. Like it was a swing state briefly before becoming reliably Republican, but yeah, it's been Republican, uh, reliably Republican, I should say, at least for I would say 15 years.
Yeah. And as we look ahead, obviously we're less than 100 days away from the election. We have had a pretty active month, or at least a pretty active 30 days. And in your life and in what your studies of history, can you remember a more active 30 days politically than what we've seen in the past month or so?
No, this has been a crazy historical election. And I say that as somebody who, like you said, I've written a book about every single presidential election in American history. I've made a video about every single presidential election in American history. This one is unprecedented in so many ways. First of all, I mean, if you want to go a little bit beyond 30 days, we had
Sure.
the first ever major party candidate convicted of felonies. So a convicted felony running as the major party candidate on one side. And then a few weeks later, that same person almost being assassinated. And then that was a few days after I skipped over, but a few days after a debate in which I have never seen such a poor performance by a presidential candidate in a debate as Joe Biden. That was something. His performance was so bad that it literally almost everybody questioned his cognitive ability afterward. And so, because of that dramatic shift, yeah, few days after that, or a few weeks after that, you have another unprecedented move, which just switching out the candidate there right before the convention, This is, I mean, it used to be, people forget that up until the 1972 Democratic National Convention, the Democratic Party, and before that, the Republican Party, they chose their nominee at the convention itself. Like this whole idea that, oh, it's undemocratic. No, political parties can pick their nominees however they want. Throughout most of American history, they've just picked their person, like the elites in the party pick their person, often in smoke-filled rooms, literally. And so, like this idea that, oh, just ordinary citizens can vote for their nominee, it's a relatively new thing. And so, but still, the fact that the Democratic Party, like, essentially just, yeah, we're not going to go with Joe Biden anymore, and then just switch it up. But then the more surprising thing to me, I guess, was that everybody just kind of went along with it because everyone's like, okay, yeah, sure, Kamala Harris will be the new nominee. That's another thing that's unprecedented. And then I haven't even mentioned the fact that before Joe Biden dropped out, you had two guys who are the oldest by far people to ever run for president on major party tickets. They only broke the record that was first set 4 years ago. And so now we still have a candidate that's Donald Trump at 78 years old is now the oldest left, but he's still the oldest person to ever run for president.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I could go on. I could keep going on. I won't shut up about it. But yeah, just a very exciting election.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned all that, and like I said, it was just about a month ago that that debate happened. Feels like it was maybe about a year ago, but it was just about 30 days since then.
I know, right? Yeah.
And so you mentioned the assassination attempt of Donald Trump, and what kind of impact do you think that had at the time, and what kind of impact do you think that'll have going forward?
Yeah, at the time, it was, of course, it was shocking. It was really a sad day, I think, for the United States. But quickly, you kind of saw like people kind of go back to their teams. Um, Donald Trump did have a slight bump in approval afterward. There's no denying like what a I think impactful moment it was, especially when you see the photographs of him afterward, and you see video footage, and he's got the blood on his ear streaked across his face. He had his fist up. It was something that really fired up his supporters more than anything I've ever seen, going back since he first entered politics in 2015. Although he really entered first in 2000, but I digress. Yeah, so that was a really, I think temporarily at least, it definitely boosted him. He was then the clear favorite to win, despite being a convicted felon, which is just amazing to think about. And then, yeah, that was also part of the reason why I think Joe Biden just decided, I just don't have much of a chance in this thing. I better pass the torch to Kamala Harris.
Yeah, and do you think it was more about the aftermath of the assassination attempt, or do you think it was more about his debate performance that he made that decision to drop out, or was it both really?
It was both, but I think the debate performance even more so because I think more than anything, especially independent voters, that they talk to in focus groups. When I say they, I mean Democratic Party officials started to research, okay, what's going wrong here? Why are we losing Americans with Joe Biden? Yeah, that people's main concern was his, I wouldn't say even age, but just cognitive ability, because there are clearly people that are older than Joe Biden that seem to be more with it cognitively. And so I think the cognitive ability was in question more than anything. You saw that during the debate.
Yeah. And so obviously Biden made the decision to step aside, and very quickly it seems like the Democratic Party united behind Kamala Harris in just a matter of 72 hours. Do you think that there was ever a chance that it was going to be anyone other than Kamala Harris?
Not really. I predicted beforehand if Joe Biden were to drop out, which I kind of predicted it a week before it happened. I said, yeah, Kamala Harris is likely to just quickly sweep in there because she's already on the ballot anyway as the running mate, and so it was just logical. And if you had an open convention, it would lead to a lot of uncertainty, which would, I think, weaken the case for Democrats, saying, hey, you can't even agree on a candidate. Whereas this unified front, which is kind of amazing too, in the fact that you see people that lean pretty far to the left that are like, sure, I'll support her, as well as even some never Trumper Republicans, who I'm still amazed they call themselves Republicans at this point. But yeah, those who just will never vote for Donald Trump, but they lean to the right politically, who are also saying, yeah, Kamala Harris it is. So
Yeah.
it's quite a coalition that already formed.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the idea of people choosing the nominee for president is a relatively new thing in our history. Do you think that it's also relatively new that the incumbent president just kind of gets a free run to the nomination from their party? Do you think that Biden stepping aside will sort of change that idea of that an incumbent president just gets to run again?
A little bit. I do think it is amazing to me how people they just kind of forget that for most of American history, it was actually more common than you realize for incumbents to decide, oh, I better not run again. The last time it notably happened was 1968 when Lyndon Johnson decided he was not going to run again because of the backlash against the Vietnam War. Before that, it was 1952, Harry Truman, who had a low approval rating because of the Korean War. Joe Biden is kind of different in a way that because there's not like one issue dominating everything. I think it's a kind of a bunch of things. But if you go back to the 1800s, I mean, come on, like you had lots of candidates who not only decided they weren't going to run while they for reelection like a year or two before the election, but even at the beginning, like Rutherford Hayes in 1877, he's like, "Yeah, this is just going to be my only term," and yeah, he stuck with his promise. So, yeah, it's actually not that big a deal if you look at all of American history for an incumbent just to say, maybe I was only meant to be a one-term president.
Yeah. And, I was thinking about obviously there's a lot of questions about the delegates and how these things are going to work. If theoretically the delegates had to choose Joe Biden at the convention, could he just refuse the nomination? Could he just say no thanks?
Yeah, that's why it was really on him this whole time. He had to be the one to say, I'm dropping out. Um, that's why it was so important that he did that because, yeah, like the primaries and caucuses wrapped up a long time ago, a few months ago, and so that's another reason why I think it was so shocking is because the Republicans have invested a lot already into attacking Joe Biden. They've spent a lot of money, and a lot of their talking points revolve around bashing Joe Biden, and so now they're scrambling. But yeah, if you look at other countries, this isn't that big a deal to like enter a race with 100 days left until election day. Actually, like countries like Japan, for example, they even have laws that say the election cycle has to be pretty short because people just get sick of on. Like it's kind of nice to actually have a shorter election cycle. People just get so jaded about it lasts 2 years. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. And I believe I saw at one point that Japan said you can only campaign for an elected office 2 weeks before the election. So I
Two
think we
weeks.
might we
That's
might
right.
want to look at that as an example law for the U.S. Um, and then with Harris, you mentioned we talked a bit ago about the sort of the Democratic Party falling in line behind her. Do you find it odd, given her run for president in 2020? A lot of people in the party, and especially a lot of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, were very much against Kamala Harris. How do you find it odd that she was had a mostly unsuccessful campaign in 2020, and that she seemed to have a lot of people against her? Do you think that'll factor into the election?
Not really, because there's just a united coalition that just really doesn't want Donald Trump back in there, and so they are willing to put aside their differences. It's the same thing. Like you can go back to I was actually in Iowa for the Iowa caucus when I remember I saw a lot of candidates in person. It was really exciting for me, and I remember, back then everyone just assumed Bernie Sanders was going to be the nominee. He was actually leading. Joe Biden was not even in the question, and at the time, Kamala Harris was criticizing Joe Biden pretty vocally at debates. And then she later ends up being his running mate and vice president. So these things change pretty quickly when you realize you have a very specific goal, and that goal continues to be just preventing Trump from getting reelected. So you're going to hear lots of criticisms of Kamala Harris if she does get elected president by Democrats.
Hmm.
No doubt. They
Yeah.
will they will not hold back.
Yeah. Well, I was also at those Iowa caucuses in 2020, and I kind of thought it was
Nice.
going to be Pete Buttigieg, but
Oh, yeah, he actually, him and Bernie both were like, they both kind of tied to win Iowa, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so when you look at that, and obviously mentioning Pete Buttigieg, Harris has a decision to make pretty soon about who her vice president, who her running mate nominee is going to be. What do you think? Obviously, there's a couple names out there. What do you think is the right choice for her, and how do you think that'll affect things in November?
Usually, whoever they pick for a running mate has minimal effect. I would say there are exceptions to that, like, John F. Kennedy picking Lyndon Johnson as his running mate in 1960, I think actually helps John F. Kennedy, especially considering that was a really close election in 1960. You might say Sarah Palin had a bit of a negative effect on John McCain, even though he was probably going to lose that election anyway to Barack Obama, whose popularity was incredible in 2008. So this year, in terms of running mates, I think people say that JD Vance has actually hurt Trump. I think in the end, it's not going to make that much difference. I think the Democratic Party, what they're looking for is they're just specifically looking at the swing states. And so it's almost certain at this point they're going to go with a prominent political figure from one of the swing states where it's going to be close. Um, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Well, Michigan, apparently Gretchen Whitmer she doesn't want to be considered anymore, but uh, somebody from the Midwest in general. That's why you have those Midwestern governors that are all being talked about, or maybe somebody like Mark Kelly, who's a senator from Arizona, another swing state. But you notice how it's mostly been white guys. So identity politics is still a something that both parties, I think, consider when they decide these things, because it's so much of it is about the optics, the vibes, the visuals, like she is a person of color, and she's a woman, which is that, I mean, the fact that we could very likely see the first female elected president. There's another opportunity here, just 8 years after the first opportunity. I think, yeah, like they're probably. It makes sense that they would go after a Midwestern politician who, a white male, just to kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, this is really, it sounds kind of bad, but to balance out the ticket.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. And so when we look at some of the races, obviously there are a lot of Senate races. Obviously, we vote for the House of Representatives every 2 years. What kind of impact do you think switching from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris will have on those key down ballot races?
I think it will help the Democratic Party, because now you're going to get more people showing up to vote. If you look at the 2020 election, it was mostly people. There wasn't like a lot of enthusiastic support for Joe Biden. There was just more people that were against Trump. I think that's ultimately why Biden won in 2020. Whereas this year, it seems like there's a little bit more excitement already for Kamala Harris, like people who maybe were reconsidering even voting at all are now like, yeah, I'm going to vote. Not only am I going to vote, I'm going to campaign for her. And so that's going to just bring more people to the polls, especially younger people, I think. And yeah, in terms of, I mean, one other kind of caveat is that before Joe Biden dropped out, if you looked at a lot of state polls for federal elections, almost universally, whoever the local person running for federal election, whether it be the Senate or the House or governor, at the state level, they all were polling better than Joe Biden. So now we're just kind of seeing, oh, Kamala Harris is now the nominee. Now the polling is pretty similar. So that just kind of shows you how historically unpopular Joe Biden was.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm going to ask you, and maybe if you don't want to answer this, you don't have to, but when we get to November and we get to that election, who's it going to be, Harris or Trump?
Oh, I will be making my prediction here in about a month on my YouTube channel. So yeah, subscribe to Mr. Beat,
YouTube.com/Mr. Beat.
slash I am Mr.
Oh, yeah,
Beat because
yes,
he
yes.
was already taken. But yeah, I will be also collaborating um, with his name is Alan Lichtman. He's famous now at this point for his 13 keys to the White House. So between him and me, we're going to predict the president. He's already predicting is probably going to be Kamala Harris, although it will be close. What I look at is economic data. So I'm going to the things that I look at more than anything are if inflation is going up or down, if the unemployment level is going up or down, and GDP is going up or down. If you look at these economic indicators, a lot of times that's all you need to figure it out. So,
Yeah. Well, I look forward to hearing your prediction when you make that in a month. And last question I'm going to ask you is a couple years ago, you made a video where you visited town here in St. Joe, and you visited the Pony Express Museum. When you came into town, what sticks out in your mind? What do you remember about St. Joe, and why did you enjoy your time here?
it reminds me a lot of like other Midwestern cities of the same size. It's a very like there's a lot of history there, a lot of older buildings that people maybe wouldn't like realize how much history is there. But yeah, it's such a like underrated place. I really enjoyed hanging out there. Like I think a lot of people who even live in Kansas City don't even realize like how much there is to do there. So yeah, visit St. Joe.
For sure. All right. Anything else you want to say about the election, about anything going on right now? Maybe about the season the Royals are having?
Oh yeah, go Royals. That's just nice to have like a chance to make the playoffs again. And then as far as like overall American history stuff, I think a lot of people are freaking out right now. And they should realize that there have been chaotic times throughout American history, and almost always things turn out okay. So if you're worrying about how the direction of the country, um, I encourage you to study history and realize that hey, actually things aren't so bad right now.
Yeah. Well, studying history is always something that I recommend as well. Um, just last thing, where can the people find you?
If you just search Mr. Beat on YouTube or TikTok or anywhere really, that's not Mr. Beast, so you can drop the S because I never miss a beat. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you, Sam.